so much. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. It's an absolute tremendous pleasure to be here with this group. Thank you to our sponsors, and I am most excited that I am a part of the future, our future leaders, our future officers, our future farmers, and I'm just over the moon. I'm very excited to be here. Before we get started, I want to share with you one of my very favorite quotes of all time, and it's by a man whose name is George MacDonald. And he said, "To be trusted is a better compliment than being loved." And when you think about that as a leader, when you're younger, you of course want to be liked. We all want to be liked. But ethics and character and leadership, never forget that people in your organizations, your family, your children, your churches truly need from you is to know that they can trust you. Because if I can trust you, we may not always agree on everything, but I know that you're going to do the best thing for the most amount of people. So we're going to go ahead and get started today. And when Shannon had contacted me about speaking on ethics and excellence, I was very, very excited because I do not think you can have an excellent organization if you're not an ethical organization. And as you heard, I'm working on my doctorate in leadership. And I think we throw out the word leadership a lot and we assume, well, you're a transparent or an authentic or a transformational leader or a servant leader. But remember, if you don't have a good inner landscape and core, you can be a horrible, evil, bad leader, okay? So being a leader, you have the choice to work for great things or you have the chance to work for your own selfish motives. So today, we're going to talk in the time that we have together on ethics and excellence and how they're inextricably linked. And talking about trust, I was in the Air Force a maintenance officer on F-15 and F-16 jets, fighter jets. All right, I loved running the flight line, I loved launching sorties, I loved deploying all over the world for different things. But one of the things that the fighter pilots, there was always this thing where they wanted to keep flying them and flying them. And I, of course, because I was into standards and regulations, I had to make sure that they were safe to have a little bit of pushback from time to time where the pilots would just fly them until the wings fell off them, literally. But we had to make sure that things were right and they were safe, first and foremost. And I can remember one of my pilot friends said to me, "Tracy, we always knew we could always trust that when we took those jets in the air, we may not always got them when we wanted them, but we knew that we were going to have as many landings as we did takeoffs because that you took the time to do that." Never forget, for our young people that are going up, you're going to get push, rush. Ethics makes a difference. It's very easy to be ethical and make the right decision when there's no heat burning down on you, okay? It's intuitive, it's fun, everybody gets along. But I want to share with you, just as we start, the one thing here, and let's make sure the clicker's working. Okay. All right, so can we advance the next slide? Okay. So go on to the next slide. Okay. There's a story of a young lady who's in an ethics class. And her professor called and said, "I want you to come on down," and he put a glass of water in her hand. And he stood her in the front of the room, and he took her arm and he shook it back and forth. And the water spilled out of it, of course. And he said to the young lady, "Why did water come out of the glass?" And she said to him, "Because you shook my arm." And he said, "No." And he took her arm and he shook it again, and more water spilled out of the glass. And he said, "Why did water spill out of the glass?" And she's a little bit confused, and she said, "Because you shook my arm, Professor." And he said, "No, let's try this one more time." And he shook her arm one last time, and he said, "Why did water spill out of the glass?" And she looked at him, and she finally realized it, and she said, "Because that's what was inside." Okay? So ethics is all about your inner landscape. When you're shaken by events, when the heat is on, what is inside you is going to come out. And so you want to make sure that that is pure, because if there's anything hidden inside of you, and we're going to talk a little bit later on in the presentation about character malformations, when the squeeze happens, that is what's going to come out of you. So we as ethical leaders need to make sure that we are maintaining a state of purity, a state of good things coming out, so that when we are called upon to take a stand, that's the good stuff that comes out. So I do a lot of leadership development, and I constantly get asked the question, "Tracy, how do we raise leaders?" And the answer is, we train people of character and conviction. History raises leaders. And one of the things that I love most about my military training, I went through 5 years of military school and was 12 years active duty, is just they hammered in the character and the conviction. Because you cannot be out there on the battlefield when the bullets are flying. That is when what's inside you is going to come out. All right, so what we want to do in the time that we have together, I want to help you create what I like to call a virtuous circle. And there are 3 questions that every leader must be asking. And I don't care if you're, where's Noah? I don't care if you're, no, I don't care if you're a seasoned CEO and you're in the twilight years of your life. These are 3 questions that every leader needs to ask. And the first is, how do I make decisions? We're going to talk today, and I'm going to give you a couple frameworks to help you become better thinkers. Now, for the young people, technology is an incredible thing. The fact that we have the world at our fingertips and we know what's going on is great. The problem is we have lost a lot of our critical thinking skills. We believe everything we've heard. We have a hard time separating fact from fiction or opinion. We get all riled up on emotionalism. All you have to do is be on social media, and we get hooked into these ridiculous, nonsensical arguments. We need to really, to be ethical leaders, you have to be a great thinker. And thinking, the neuroscience technicians and the neuroplasty people are now saying that the brain is a muscle, and you can develop your thinking skills just like everything else. The second question you have to ask is, who's telling the truth? Okay, when we grew up, there was a lot of checks and balances in place that made sure that things that were put out into the public were reasonably true. Now, there's always bias that creeps in because we're only human. But now, anybody with a platform and an internet hookup can put anything out there. What's worse yet, you can hide behind anonymity and put incredibly damaging and false stuff out there about people, all right? The important part to know before you can make a decision, you are going to have to rely on other people to get input. Who's telling the truth? And that's the second thing we're going to cover. And lastly, what can I do to cultivate an integrous organization? You want to make sure that everybody in your organization understands that integrity is all about the individual. And you cannot have a great organization without great individuals. I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, people in the Air Force are this or people in this kind. No. That's too broad-based. It's all about the individuals that make it up and their sense of integrity. Okay, so next. All right, so I want to share with you a thing about group. It's called groupthink stinks. And I know a lot of us like to think that our groups have really critically aware, critical thinkers, independent people. But for those of you that have ever seen this, it's called the Asch conformity experiment. And those of you that have studied psychology might be aware of this. And there's a video on YouTube you can watch this. This happened back in the 1950s. And there was a researcher, and what he did was he gathered a group of 6 men together in a room. And then he went ahead and he showed this next thing up here and said, okay, look at Exhibit 1, and then look at Exhibit 2. Which line in Exhibit 2 is most like Exhibit 1? Well, it's intuitively obvious to the most casual observer that the answer is A, correct? Well, in this research experiment, what he did was he had 5 of the 6 that were setups, okay? They knew what was going on and they were to give the wrong answer. So in other words, when the question was posed, they were told to give the answer B or C. One of the individuals was a true test subject, so he did not know what was going on. So it's very interesting to watch. As they go through and they ask them, okay, which is most like the other one? They had 4 in the beginning that would all say the wrong answer. And then when it got to the 5th person, what percentage of the time do you think that they said the right answer versus went along with the group? 37% of the time, okay? So I just want you to realize, a lot of times when I'm in meetings, I will put a ringer in the group to just play the devil's advocate. Because, next slide, when you put somebody in there that argues the counterpoint, the 6th person that knew what was really going on, that decreases to only 5% of the time. So just be aware in a group. If you're sitting there and you're a leader and you're putting it forward and everybody's looking at you, you know, they always say, if everybody's thinking alike, somebody's not thinking. And I am all about consensus, but we should be all about asking the tough questions and arguing against our future selves and saying, I know this looks like, how could this possibly not be a good thing? Trust me, there are always unintended consequences, and it's really important. So I like that, to just be aware. And this is, you know, this should keep you out of a criminal thing too, because you don't want to worry about being on a jury, right? And worried about 37% of the time somebody's just going to go along with what everybody else says. But this is a fact. It's human nature. There's a lot of research why we do it. Okay, so on to the next slide. Okay, so managing complexity. What we do as managers is we manage complexity. Leaders, they manage change. Leadership is all about going to the future and managing change. Strategic thinking. But before you can be a strategic thinker, you have to be first a critical thinker. And management is all about the critical thinking process. All right? So first of all, you have to get clarity. Every ethical leader should be asking as many questions. They should be asking the most questions in the room. And I read a book called QBQ, and it said there's questions, but then there's questions behind the questions. And for those of you that have ever taken a statistics class, there's a phrase called correlation does not equal causation. And a lot of times as leaders, we think because something is correlated, that is the root cause. I work with a lot of nonprofit groups, and we deal with disadvantaged groups. And of course, everybody wants to assume that in order to make things better, the answer is money, okay? But is money really the true answer? Is money going to fix it, okay? If I gave everybody in the world $1 billion, would that truly identify them? Well, of course it would not. So then you get to peel back the onion, you get to unpack and say, no kidding, really what is the true issue that we're trying to solve? Otherwise you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of resources on it. So first of all, ask a million questions, okay? Next, you then want to take the information and you want to process it. Warren Bennis has a great quote. He says, none of us is as smart as all of us. So a lot of times we think about leaders and we're in this room by ourselves and it's lonely and everybody's waiting for us to come out from on high and give a response, okay? But when you are going through the process, you want to make sure you get as many data input as possible so you can make the best possible decision. Lastly, then you have to take all the information that you have and you have to integrate it into making a formal decision. So one of the new things that they're talking about is called the RED method, and it's the keys to critical thinking. First of all, when you have a decision to make or somebody runs into your office with their hair on fire and says, hey, what are we going to do about this? First thing is, stop and think. We are so accustomed to, in this world with the 24-hour news cycle, people running up and asking you to weigh, Bob, did you hear about this? They want you to weigh in stuff right away. Remember, unless we're going to war and somebody's asking you to launch something, you don't need to make an action or a decision right away, okay? Take your time. And I will tell people, hey folks, I haven't heard about that, so give me some time to research it. 99 and 44% of the time, it's not a decision that has to be made right away. Okay? And I tell people, listen, I'm going to go and find out. Now, some people are going to get pushback on you because they want your immediate response. And for leaders, this is important because if you come out of a meeting and the press is there, or somebody that wants to quote you, or somebody that has a camera that wants to put you on Facebook Live, okay, kind of thing, it's important to be aware and not get drawn. Don't fall into this trap, okay? Take it from me. And so you want to make sure that you stop and think. And I let people know, hey, I need to research that. And remember, just because you don't believe something, it doesn't mean that you disbelieve it. It just means that you haven't got enough data to make an educated statement on it. And I can't tell you so much, especially for our folks going in the military. It is all about following orders, but it is also all about stopping and thinking and processing the information. So number one, we have to recognize our assumptions. Psychologists say that we all have, it's called BABS, biases, assumptions, and blind spots. And I have a lot of people will say to me, yeah, that other person, their biases, assumptions, I'm like, you do realize that you have, well, no, we all like to think we're so objective, okay? But trust me, they say it's nature, it's nurture, but what really forms us, our character, is our events that we go through in life. We go through life with a bucket, and every experience that we have fills up our bucket. So when we're confronted with information to make a decision, we cannot help but have a preconceived notion about it. It is why when they interview on jury duty, if you've been through something ahead of time, they will typically disqualify you because you will have a preconceived assumption about it, okay? So make sure, it's also a false consensus. There's another Star Wars movie coming out. I adore Star Wars, therefore I assume everybody wants to talk on and quote every Star Wars movie. Guess what? Not everybody loves Star Wars. Can't believe it, but you want to make sure that you recognize the assumptions. Don't just assume that everybody's thinking like you. Secondly, you want to evaluate that information. Okay? You want to take it in and you want to process it. You want to unpack it, because I promise you, there's something in there that you may not have preconceived about, and somebody will tell you about it. And then D, then and only then do you draw conclusions and take actions. They say that the test of a first-rate mind is the ability to understand the opposing argument better than they do their own. Could you imagine in this world if we actually got to the point of dialogue where we could have a healthy respect and collaborate and understand each other's point before we just go into the divisiveness? When you're a critical thinker, this is gonna, I tell people, it'll take the jerk out of knee-jerk. You won't feel the need to fight and cuss and deride and belittle, because you're like gonna be looking at the facts. And the facts tend to take the emotion out of it, okay? And you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to, all right? When you're a critical thinker, you get to live at peace, and it is a tremendous thing, okay? Next slide. All right, so next, ethical decision making. It's called EDM. Critical thinking is impacted by our morals and our values. It can't help but be, okay? So we want to take all the input in, but at the core, what is going to guide our final decision is our values. And so we want to go through not just the best thing to do, but also the right thing to do. I can think of when I got out and I came back to run my family business in 2008, it's when the whole Fannie Freddie mess was going on, okay? How could somebody think that it was acceptable to sell a $300,000 house to somebody making $30,000 a year? But yet that's exactly what happened. And so when you talk about ethics, it's not just the best thing for you to do, and I'm sure they did it because, boy, it made them a lot of money. But is it the right thing to do? When you're confronted with an ethical decision, remember, is my temporary gain worth causing somebody long-term pain? And if you can't square that away, then you are in the ethical decision-making world. One thing I also want to say about ethical decision-making, it is never black and white, okay? You have your core values, but every decision we make, there's going to be repercussions for somebody that comes out on the other side of what we do. And that's okay. Don't beat yourself too much up over that. All we can do is make the best possible decision with the most amount of information at that particular time. And then I always say, if you get some other input later, you can reevaluate that decision and make it again. Ethical decision making is really about your judgment. And people say, well, Tracey, we shouldn't judge people. I'm not talking about being judgmental. Judgment. We should weigh judgment on what is acceptable behavior in our organization, in our own personal lives, every single day of our lives. Ethical decision making is about your motives. You want to make sure when somebody brings something to you as an issue, look at them and really consider the motive. Whenever I take input from outside experts, I really got to consider where they're coming from. For the folks that are over on JROTC, I can remember when I was a young officer in the military, people would bring issues to me. And I had to really look at their motive. Because in a couple cases, their motive was actually to get their boss in trouble, okay? When I really pulled back. But had I just taken it at face value and not considered the motive. So ethics is rarely cut and dried, and it's often way down below the surface, and you have to unpack. And then also, typically, you're going to be dealing with emotions. In that cases that I talked about, somebody was upset because somebody had directed them to do something they didn't want to do. So they were angry, and that was the root cause of that. So just take your time, unpack, talk to somebody about what is your motive for bringing this to me. You try and deconstruct the emotion out of it so you can get clarity on the issue. Because if you do that, you're going to save yourselves a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of animosity and a lot of bad feelings going underground. All right? So also with ethical decision making, rarely is ethical decision making just about what's in the moment. Ethical decision makers always are looking long time and arguing against their future self. Okay? They say with ethics, you want to go ahead and almost look to the future. And if you can somehow say, I'm going to make this decision, I think it's the best decision, but what if 5 years from now I find out this is the worst possible decision I've ever made in my life? Can you argue against your future self? And if you can, then you go ahead and make it. There's a great example of ethical decision making. Back in 2013, there was a race in Spain, and there was a runner, a Spanish runner, and Daya was his name, and there was a Kenyan runner in the front, and his name was Mutai. And they were coming to the end of this race, and this is a beautiful ethical decision. They were coming to the end of the race, and the gentleman from Kenya erroneously assumed that the race ended 10 meters before it actually ended. So he slowed down because he thought he had won the race. And by the way, he was a bronze medalist from the 2012 Olympics, okay? So he slowed down. The gentleman behind him from Spain came up behind him, and right, you got a decision. Life is all about these momentary decisions where you can choose to do the right thing or you can choose to do the best thing for you. And Mutai looked back, and the audience was yelling to him in Spanish, "Go, you're not there yet." But of course, he could not understand what they were saying. So Anaya came up behind him, put his arm on him, and led him to the race where that gentleman actually won. And when you think about that, they interviewed that runner, and he said, "I didn't deserve to win. I did what I had to do. He was the rightful winner. He created a gap that I couldn't have closed if he hadn't made a mistake. As soon as I saw him stopping, I knew I wasn't going to pass him." And so when we go forward, and a lot of times in business, even in the military, we get this killer instinct, we're win at all costs, or dog eat dog world. Remember, being ethical is not just doing about the best thing for you, but about the right thing to do for the entity and the organization. So I want you to remember that as you're going to get posed with some of these things in life, okay? So now, what they're talking about in this day and age and for our up-and-coming leaders, it was more cut and dried for people in my generation, but they're saying now that the old ethical decision-making paradigms, they're no longer enough. And now they're saying we have to go to sense-making strategies. A lot of times in business, even in the military, in nonprofits, whatever business you're in, you are going to be faced with what the researchers call a vexing set of circumstances. And I love that word. It just means I didn't see it coming, and I'm really not sure what we're going to do about it. How many of you have been there, okay? It's like, holy Toledo, what are we going to do? So what the scientists say here is back in the 80s, we made decisions scientifically, okay? Science finds, industry applies, and man conforms. Then, now, we kind of went into systems thinking where we analyze what is going on by social and ethical components. But they're saying in the future, because of the global economy, because we're all interlinked, because of the changes in regulation, because the changes in environmental law, because the changes in the makeup of the workforce where we're so diverse, what used to work in our microcosm before has to be expanded, okay? With technology, information used to kind of be power because not everybody would know. You can find anything out online with the swipe of a finger, okay? And people know if your company makes a layoff or a wrong decision, guess what? It is going to get broadcast immediately. And now, with the beautiful diversity we have now have to consider other people's value systems and their cultures as we make things that we may have thought about before. So sense-making strategy is all about what is happening. You have to recognize the problem in today's term. This is tough for leaders, okay? Because a lot of times we have, I mean, for those of us that have 30 plus years under our belts, we're like, I got this, I know how this works. We don't have it. The one thing that going to school every day has shown me is that stuff is changing all the time. Be open to it. Next, after what is happening, we have to talk about why is this important? And again, this is information gathering. And they talked about that earlier today in the moment that we shared. The more input data you can get from people, the more likely you're going to be able to make an ethical decision. Because otherwise, you're going to miss out on a critical piece of information. And then lastly, how is this going to impact me? How can you best integrate the information so when you're interviewed by the press, or whether you're written up on the Wall Street Journal, or whether you're the top trending item on Facebook, you are able to defend your actions and say, you know what, we did the best that we could do, and it wasn't like a, oh my gosh, I should have seen that coming, I forgot to consider this. So remember that. Okay, so that was the what, that was, or how do we become better thinkers. Now we're going to talk about who. Who can you trust? All right? This is one of the most important things in life, because even though we are ethically grounded, we are like lone little sheep waiting to get picked off unless we have a flock of people that have our back. In the Air Force, you never leave your wingmen, okay? You always have to have that person that has your back. So we're going to talk about how do you discern authenticity. And I love the word discernment. When I was younger, I'd be like, I just want to be smart. Then I want to be wise. Isn't that cool to be wise? Discernment is a higher level, it's almost a metacognitive ethical decision making, where you are considering things, but you also trust in the inner landscape, and you trust your intuition, okay? We all want to ratchet just making smart decisions up to discerning. It's a whole new level of making decisions. So Henry Cloud, who's one of my all-time favorite authors, one of my heroes, he wrote a book called The Power of Other. And I read this about 1.5 years ago. And I was at a point in my life where I had just sold my facilities. I had just went through a professional betrayal that I should have seen coming, and I probably did see coming, but I avoided dealing with it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that for those of you guys that sense that something's not right in your life. And I just was tired, and I was burnt out on dealing with people. And that's very difficult for a person that's supposed to be a motivator of people to actually, the last thing I wanted to be around was people, okay? And I remember thinking, boy, God, I love people, but people, okay? And if you've ever been there, you know that sometimes our hearts are big, but man, our skin gets thin, and everything's bugging you. So I was like, okay, this is God telling me I'm just gonna pack up all my pieces. I work from home, I'm working on my doctorate, I have my computer, I can blog, I can study, I can write the dissertation that's gonna change the world. I have 4 dogs, this is all, I have my garden, this is all I need in life. My dogs, my books, my writing, and that's it, okay? And I started to do something very terrible. I started to isolate myself, okay? I started to withdraw. And any of you going through this, or if you see someone going through this, that is our natural tendency when we get fed up. If people kind of drop off your radar, reach out to them, okay? Because we are coded genetically from an evolutionary standpoint, as well as from a spiritual standpoint, if you are so inclined that way, to be connected and attached as a body. So Henry Cloud wrote this book, and he talks about the 4 quadrants of relationships. And the first quadrant is no connection. These are the people in your life that I say are no value added. I heard a term recently called ghosting. Have any of you ever heard of that? Okay, where somebody's all of a sudden your best friend and then poof, they're gone. Okay, that was not a true connection. Also, if you have people in your organization that are a little bit too transparent, like you don't ever hear from them, that is not an authentic connection, okay? I have people that'll tell me, Tracy, I got this, you don't have to check up on me. That's not a good sign, okay? Something else is going on, because we all should want to share with one another, because we have to collaborate and we have to pour, and we have to, it's being transparent with one another, okay? Radio silence is not transparency, just remember that. All right, the next is there's a bad connection. These are the people in your life that no matter what, only have negative things to say to you. This isn't gonna work. Dr. Newman, I can't believe you came up with this idea. You're not good enough. It just goes on and on. Just pure negative. And maybe this is in your personal life, okay? Maybe it's a sibling that no matter what is always caustic or toxic, okay? I call them the emotional vampires. They just want to suck the life out of you. These are the people that, you know, some people brighten a room when they walk in, others when they walk out, okay? That's these type of people. So these are the people that you know them, you know. When you go to work, when you find out they're on vacation or out sick, you like have a party because you don't have to work around them, okay? This is bad connection, okay? Next, the pseudo good connection. These are the syrupy sweet, probably mamas are like this, okay, no matter what, even if the train's about to go off the rails, no matter what, these are the people, they'll tell you what they think you want to hear and not what you need to hear. They don't mean to be bad, but they're actually enablers because they do the syrupy sweet. I've worked with people that are like, Tracy, you know, the business is about to fold, and they're like, Tracy, you're doing great. And I'm like, really? I'm doing great? We're about to fold. We're not going to. So that is not good either. And so you want to share that with people. These are the people that are going to, you know, not going to push back on you. And again, I'm not judging anybody, but I had plenty of these type 3 relationships in my life, and they are like donuts. They're gonna fill you for a little bit, but there's no nutrition added, and then you're gonna get a crash after your sugar high, okay? So you wanna, what I needed was quadrant 4, which is your true connection. And Henry Cloud lays it out beautifully in his book. These are the people that want your success more than you want it. These are the people that are going to have the tough conversations with you, that are going to challenge you. These are the people that are going to have your back. We talked about in the military, okay? That's why loyalty is so big. We have to be there for one another, okay? And I wasn't burnout. I was burnout because I didn't have the quadrant 4 relationships. So that woke me up and I realized, hey, I need to pair out the other 3 quadrants. And so what I did, I've been back running the business for 7 years. My father built a legacy. He had all kinds of Zig Ziglar, Ken Blanchard. I mean, all these guys were wonderful friends of his. But yet I hadn't called on any of them because I was trying to do it all on myself. I hadn't dialed into the power of the true connections. And I immediately, as I had a little pity party for about 30 seconds, I shed a little bit of a tear, and then I said, that's it. I cannot just resign myself and recoil into my own home. I need to engage in the power of the other. And so I went and I sent an email out to everybody and I said, I've just been through this crisis and I need your support. I need your connections, I need your prayers, I need your positivity, I need your whatever. Please help me. And immediately, Tracey, we can't, what do you need us to do? We're gonna do this. I've been waiting for you for 8 years. We loved you, and we love you. It wasn't just about my dad. It was about me. And so it's just so important as you're dealing with ethics, you're going to go through some really hard times. Leaders are forged in the fires. They call it crucible leadership. Nobody becomes a leader when everything is great, okay? I once interviewed somebody for a leadership paper, and they had the perfect life, the perfect job, the perfect family, the perfect spouse. It was the most boring interview I've ever done in my life. I'm like, I got nothing here. I got nothing. I want to talk about the scars, the battles, the fires, because that, and character, it's not a fun thing, but it's a character building thing. And so just make sure when you're in your organization, and even your personal life, and you're like, Tracey, you are aware Thanksgiving's coming up, and I might have to sit at a table with a couple. I understand. Trust me, I understand. But you just want to make sure, you're going to have these people in your life. I'm not saying, say, hey, I heard the speaker, and I have identified that you're quadrant 2. Boom, you're out. Because I can tell probably a lot of us are kind of geared towards that. We got to extend the hand of mercy. We got justice. We got mercy. But just remember, you don't want your inner circle. These people are always going to be in your life, but your core circle needs to be quadrant 4 relationships. Okay? So character malformations. So let's talk about, I call it the Judas principle. What happens if somebody that you thought had your back doesn't? Has this ever happened to anybody in here? Okay? I'm going to tell you, it does happen. It happens to the best of us. It happens to the smartest of us. It happens to the kind of stuff. This is not about you. This is about them. So please don't try to beat yourself up too much. I beat myself up for years. There's no point. This is on them. There was something in them, a character malformation, that just because you didn't see it, maybe you should have. It's immaterial, okay? Something's going on that's within them. I interviewed a pastor from a church in Hawaii, largest church in Hawaii, 20,000 attendees. Brilliant man. He knew a thing or two about getting the rug pulled out from underneath him. And I asked him, what was your greatest leadership failure? What hurt you the most? And he said he had an underling that he was training and mentoring. And for the past 3 years, unbeknownst to him, this individual was planning on the side to kind of do a coup, start his own church, and peel off about half the people. And when it finally came to the head, that's what happened. And I mean, it was earth-shattering when the people that we trust in our inner circle actually show us that side of themselves. But we're human. And I'm not here to judge people, okay? There are times in my life when I have hurt people too. But just watch the people in your organization. You need to make sure if they are serving their ego or the institution. I had the joy of going on a tour, the profound epiphany of touring your museum, the Oklahoma City Museum, yesterday. Just because somebody wears the uniform or somebody sits at your table and nods your head, Timothy McVeigh, he was one of us once, okay? You need to really do gut checks with people. And trust me on this, if you sense something isn't right, you need to pull that person in and you need to route it out and you need to unpack it. Because although I've had the rug pulled out for me several times, I can say in every single one of those times, I had an inkling something wasn't right. But I hoped it would go You deal with character malformations. Hope is not a strategy, okay? You need to go ahead and call this out and identify this, all right? And you need to get with your quadrant 4. So Henry Cloud has another brilliant book called Necessary Endings. Has anybody ever read it? I mean, it is a great book to let you know, Kenny Rogers has the song, you got to know when to hold them, you got to know when to fold them. And the most important thing for a leader is going to be, when do I keep pouring into this? And when do I say, that's it? The good of the institution is more important than trying to figure this one odd duck out. Or it could be, Henry Cloud calls out 3 kinds of people. And as you're sitting there across the table and you know something's wrong, you need to evaluate which of these 3 that individual is. First is the wise person. Iron sharpens iron. You're going to give me constructive feedback and I'm going to go, wow, that hurt me, but that didn't harm me. I needed to hear that. Thank you so much. Okay? These are the people that when you give feedback to, they're going to go, excellent. I can remember when I was a captain in the Air Force and we were deployed over to Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. And I had one of my staff sergeants and he said, hey, Captain, there's no doubt, it's because I was trying to be all officery, lead, follow, get out of the way, And so, isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And so, he said to me, Captain, there's no doubt you know what's going on. You know how to run the flight line, but somehow when you come across, it's totally uncool. And I was like, wow, the enemy could have shot me in the back and that would have hurt less than that, okay? But I was so thankful, okay? Because he gave me feedback. He was wise enough to give me feedback, and I was wise enough, even though that's smarted, to go, you know what? And I am so thankful for the few people in my life that have told me, just a couple words to go, Tracey, are you kidding me? Do you know how you're coming across? What makes you think that you can act like that? And they have just kind of, in the military, you get locked up, you know what I'm saying? They let me know, and so that is wise. When you talk to people, and when you have friends that you talk to, they go, thank you for sharing that with me. Next is the foolish people. These are the people that it may take a little bit longer. They may say, oh, Tracey, she don't know what she's talking about, but eventually they're going to get it, okay? We are all works in progress. I got told some of the things that I needed to work on probably 150 times before I finally said, I'm going to do it. But the foolish people, you're going to have to really mentor and pour more into them. Wise people are one and done. Hey, Terry, I got it, okay? Somebody else may be, hey, it's going to take a little bit more time, so you just got to keep working on it. There's a third category, and that's called evil. These are the people that no matter what are bent on tearing down the organization from within. And I think that is the saddest, most painful thing at all. I expect the enemy to come from outside the gates. The worst thing you're ever going to go through as a leader is when somebody within your own house tears it down from the inside, okay? In a marriage, with children, in your church, this is really difficult to deal with. So you need to realize there's maybe people in your organization, you have tried everything you can do, and if it's been more than 2 months, you need to realize change is probably not going to happen, and you need to do what you need to do to take care of the health of the organization. Because remember, the best way to keep great people is to deal with the bad. Great ethical people are intrinsically motivated. They're going to be alongside of you and cheering you on. But what you have to do is get rid of the nonsense that goes on. And no matter how good your organization is, okay, stuff always comes into your tree or your house that was not intended. I have 4 rescue dogs. Okay, and I love the ones, they all write books. I know you can't believe it. They're best-smelling authors, they really are. And one of my dogs, she had to go through a radical transformation where she let go of a lot of negativity and bad habits. And we had, one of her chapters is, do you have to fumigate your life? And I mean all sections of your life. Because in these organizations, as my dog Ruby Red used to say, let a single flea stay on thee, and soon you'll be in misery, okay? You let that one bad apple. And I read a book about 10 years ago called Snakes in Suits, When Sociopaths Go to Work, okay? And it is all about, I'm telling you folks, I'm glad you're here, because I've been waiting to tell people this. When bureaucracies are a haven for people that hide out, that are notoriously poor performers. They're snakes. They're weasels. We used to call them in the Air Force, so that guy's a weasel, okay? We'd also call them slicks, self-licking ice cream cones, okay? I'd also call them SOBs, which means self-oriented behavior, okay? It's all about Okay? And so these are the evil people, no matter what. They're not coming your way. So you need to cut your losses. And you know what? I'm not saying that people can't change. I have seen evil people actually have something in their life where they had the epiphany or some trauma and they realized. But that's on them. You have to take care of the organization. You think this is going to go away, nothing ever goes away. What it does is it goes underground, and it's like a cancer cell. Oh, that little tumor, nothing's going to happen from that, right? I just buried a cousin 2 weeks ago that had a tumor from a year ago. It'll go away. Guess what? It doesn't go in your body, and it will destroy the organization. I can't emphasize enough. Ethics is all about you're a shepherd. The organization is your flock, and you need to make sure that you don't have wolves within the flock. And I love the quote, there's a Facebook meme, and it says, I'd rather eat crumbs with bums than steaks with snakes. So just remember that. Okay, so signs you're in the lion's den. You say, Tracy, okay, so I'm getting the sense that something's not going on right. I'm going to tell you 3 things that I have learned from work, because unfortunately, I get interviewed a lot to talk about poor behavior, bully bosses. One of the things I just got interviewed to talk about was, next slide, Uber. Travis Kalanick, okay, president of Uber, chairman of the board also. Uber, anybody that used Ubers knows, a lot of controversy about, over the summer, about some really unbelievably horrible behavior going in that organization, okay? So when I got interviewed on a lot of the radio stations, it was all about how bad Mr. Travis is. Let me tell you something. I got to tell you, when stuff comes to the surface, trust me, a lot of people already know about it. I had an issue where there was an affair going on with an underling, some inappropriate relationships, and when it got found out, I remember my hierarchy saying, good, we dealt with it. Okay, now it can just, and I said, and they're like, I'm glad we caught it before anybody else found out. Trust me, by the time you find out, everybody already knows. So it is imperative that you keep your ear to the ground, and we're going to talk the last part about how do you make sure, because we can't be everywhere as leaders. Chain of command, I got to trust even my one-stripers to tell me the truth and come to me when something needs to be told, okay? And so we rely on people to be integrous and use the channel. So I can remember telling them, this is not just about him. This is about the board. This is about your C-levels. This is about, there were tons of signs that this was going horribly south. But I'm sure being valued at $7 billion, that excuses a lot of really poor behavior. Ethics is about checking your ego. The next thing that I want to talk about, whenever you catch somebody that comes to your attention that this is going on, it's not the first time. I interviewed another gentleman on leadership, and he had found out, it was one of the youth camps, and they had found out one of their counselors had abused a minor, okay? Person came in, what do we want to do? Now, it's different in this day and age, but back then the tendency is, and not just this ethics violation, but others, give him another chance. And he said to me, Tracy, mark my words, it's not the first time. And as they went and they found out, by the time he gets in it, here we have Mr. Harvey Weinstein, and I'm not picking on him, tomorrow it'll be somebody else. But as you found out with that, where there's smoke, there's fire. Don't ever let your bosses say to you, I think we got it taken care of. Boy, you better make sure there's no embers that are underneath that are waiting to reignite. Very serious stuff, because this will take you out just as you're sitting there thinking, I got taken. You need to find out what happened, how did I not hear about it, how did I get this big? And you really need to really make sure it's put out. We're going to deal with that in the next couple slides. Lastly, be aware that there's a tendency for us to hire down. And there's a wonderful book by Dr. Steve Sample. He was the 10th president of USC, one of my heroes. And he has a book called The Contrarian's Guide to Leadership. I love this book. He was the president of USC from 91 to 2010, just passed away last year. He says in that book that A+ people tend to hire A people. A people tend to hire B- people. B- people tend to hire D people, and D. So you see what happens. And a lot of people say, well, Tracy, I just needed to fill a spot. Let me tell you something. If you want it bad, that's how you're going to get it. I would much rather go with a vacant slot than have a poor fit. Do your homework, do your due diligence, because sooner or later, what is within the person is going to come out. And you want to, and again, we're not God. I can't read people's hearts or motives, but we want to do everything we possibly can. And it's a great thing to realize when you are hiring, and they always say now, you hire for character, You train for skill. Plus, we're going to be replaced by robots in 10 years anyway, so. But I'll tell you what, no robot is ever going to replace ethics and emotional intelligence and character. So that's why I feel pretty confident about the human race, at least us ethical ones, so to speak. Okay, so next slide. All right, so lastly here, when we're talking about the what, so we talked about how to become better thinkers, who do we know who we can trust, okay? And the quadrant fours and then the other people. And now I want to talk about lastly what? How do we cultivate the inner landscape? Motivation is the portal to engagement. People have to want to be people of character. It is not intuitively obvious to us. Okay? We are selfish creatures by nature. Okay? As my dad always said, you didn't teach me how to steal or be sinful by nature. We're selfish creatures by nature. Okay? So we want to make sure you have to be intrinsically motivated and not extrinsically motivated by rules. Okay? I do prison ministry where I go into state corrections institutes and we read personal development book and character building with men. Some of them are in for life. And you think, well, what could they possibly? Because they still have the intrinsic motivation that even though they're going to die behind bars, they still want their life to have value and meaning. These gentlemen in the darkest places are intrinsically motivated. That's what you want to make sure with your people. That I don't care, Noah, however old Noah is, you can start at that young age to build that intrinsic motivation. So next slide. Okay, Good to Great. I'm sure a lot of people in this room have read this. This is one of my favorite books. Jim Collins talks about the culture of discipline. And Daniel was telling me about the history of Kim Ray before. And you can tell an organization, the more rules they have, the less intrinsically motivated their people are. Okay, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have rules. Because of HR and compliance, we have to. I once tried to separate somebody that had some poor behavior, and I was told, well, you can't because you don't have a policy on it. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I have to think, do I have to have a policy on biting people at work? Probably I do in this day and age. But you want to make sure that, oh, I'm sorry, could you back one up? This slide. The more people, and the ethics of entrepreneurship doesn't mean that you're an entrepreneur. What it means is that I own the ethics of the organization. I represent it. I represent it on Facebook. I represent it when I'm out in public. I represent the values of the organization. It's up to the individuals because we as leaders, I can't be the moral police, nor do I want to be the moral police. I want you to own your ethics. And I want you, when you see something going on, that you let me know. When I was at the Air Force Academy, you walk up the Bring Me Men ramp and it says the honor code. I will not lie, cheat, steal, nor tolerate those who do. So ethics isn't just about me keeping my nose clean. It's about if you see something else going on in the organization that you think is not healthy for the organization, you let somebody know. And when you get people like that, then you really get people that have individual ownership, and then they have a culture of discipline. They don't have to be told not to steal from the company till. They don't have to be told not to look at X-rated stuff on the, I mean, come on people. Some of this stuff we just ought to know as basic human adults. But you got to make sure that they know, you can still have the rules, but they should be intrinsically motivated. Because otherwise, if you try and keep people in line by rules, trust me, they will find another way to get around the rules. Trust me, we can be very creative when we want to. All right, so that's the culture of discipline. Next, you want to create exemplary followers. I have a link that I will send you, and it is from the book called The Power of Followership by Robert Kelly. So I'm reading all about leaders, I'm all about leadership, and all of a sudden I'm realizing, you know what? Leaders are not leaders unless they have what? Followers. And now the research is saying that leadership is really about 20% of the equation, followership is 80. So for you young people that think, well, I don't have a seat at the table, I don't have wrong. You have the power, okay? You can't lead if you don't have followers. So he has a great test that you can take online for free. You can go back to your organizations today and do it. And it separates each individual. It's like Strength Finders, only it tells you, everybody wants to know what kind of a leader you are. And I just wrote a book called A Message to Millennials. And I let the millennials know that the greatest way that you can become a leader is to become an effective follower. And that is one thing the military taught me in absolute spades. Because if serving is beneath you, leadership is beyond you, okay? So there's 5 different categories of followership that he has. Down here in the bottom left-hand side, that's called passive. These are the people in your organization that are not critical thinkers, and they're not engaged in the workforce. In other words, you have to follow up on their work to make sure they get it done. And they could see somebody next door doing something completely illegal and they're not going to say anything to you. This is not good in an organization, okay? Because you need people to be engaged. Otherwise, if I as a boss have to keep following up to help you do your job, both of us don't need to get paid to do the same job. You read my drift here? So you want to help them be aware. Passive is where we all start. Then over here, the conformists, these are people that are engaged, but they're not critical thinkers. That's kind of that pseudo-good connection. Whatever you want, Brent, I'll do whatever you want, okay? Even if it's something horribly wrong. You need people that are going to be critical thinkers. Up here in the upper left-hand corner is the alienated follower, okay? This is what I spend a lot of my but their engagement isn't always high. And I got to tell you something, for our young future leaders, I was always kind of a malcontent. And they always say that entrepreneurship is the last refuge for the troublemaking individual. And I was always like, yeah, because I'm a okay? It's okay to question, but if you can't take those questions and then apply them in a creative way to the solution, you're just a pain in the butt. Okay? So you want to make sure that with your alienated followers, that you make sure that it's good to be a critical thinker, but you also need to be a part of it. And also for my young friends, you have to find out, there's a statement, there's a hyperbole, please, I'm not recommending anybody physically fall on their sword, but you have to know what hills you're going to die on, okay? There are things ethically that you want to go fight the fight over. That's maybe 0.01% of the stuff in our lives, because we're in America and we basically have a lot of great rules and backup checks. The rest of the stuff, it may rub you the wrong way. It may not be the decision you would have made. But my goodness, get on board, say your piece, and then get on the train and be a part of it. I spent way too many years of my life I would eventually do it, but boy, I sure didn't make it easy for any of my employers, okay? You want to be an effective, pragmatic is the people that are kind of borderline. Sometimes they think, sometimes they're engaged. The goal is to move everybody up into the effective quadrant. These are people that are critical thinkers. They're going to speak up in meetings. They're going to challenge you in a respectful and non-insubordinate way. Remember, there's a big way to say it. Who was it? Somebody said tact. I think it was Patton or somebody, or Churchill said tact is telling somebody to go to hell in such a way that they actually look forward to the trip. Okay? So you want to make sure that there is a way it ain't what you say, it's the way that you say it. So you want to make sure that you get up to I want you engaged, I need your input, but boy, then I need your help, because otherwise you're just, I get salespeople call me all the time and say, Tracy, let me tell you what's wrong with your organization. I'm well aware of what's wrong with the organization. What I really need is people to help me. So get these people. Don't run off the alienated guys. In research, they call them the deviants, not social deviants, just professional deviants. So they're rabble-rousers, okay? They're malcontents. But if you can get those guys, because they're high thinkers, bring them over to your side. Challenge them. Let them know. All right? Next slide. Okay, so conflict resolution. I want to talk about this. There is a big difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking. Okay? After the first Gulf War, I kept going back to the places where we went to war, and guess what? We were part of the UN peacekeeping force. Nothing against that, but really it was a fake détente. There were no weapons, everybody just stood there. It's like when you tell you if your kids are fighting, go into the room and figure it out. That is peacekeeping, okay? That is not a good solution. Peacemaking is all about when you sit the people down, when you unpack the root of the issue, when you have the tough conversations, and you seek restoration and healing. That's tough empathy. Next slide. And that is using the chain. I can't emphasize enough, not just for our military friends. 99% of the time when I tell people, you need to use the chain, and when you talk one-on-one to somebody, first time anybody comes to you with an ethical issue or otherwise, did you talk to him about it? No? Let's go talk to him about it. And you will be surprised, 80% of problems will go. I love this. You hear fight or flight, okay? I'm going to fight you, I'm going to take you to court, I'm going to defame you, I'm going to win, I'm going to get what I deserve, or I'm going to check out, I'm going to create a false identity, I'm going to commit suicide, I'm going to avoid my problem. Neither one of these is good responses. We want to get in the middle. Peacemaking. You get to the core of the issue. You try and make any wrongs that may happen. Arbitration. Peacemaking responses. And then only then can you have restoration and healing. Otherwise, it's just going underground. website for the peacemaker.net. But again, a big difference. Sometimes we're peacekeeping, and that's enabling. A lot of times that's conflict avoidance. We want to be peacemakers. Next slide. Okay? Internal integrity, just to wrap it up, if it's there, deeds are going to follow. If you're constantly having to be the moral police or hitting people, killing in your organization, something is going on with the landscape of your people. If deeds will follow, you want to sharpen your decision-making skills, and you also want to decide who you're dealing with. And number 3, you want to be honest and self-directed. All right? And again, ethics is from here to here. Ethics isn't from my mouth to your ears or back, it's all in here. It's an inside job. So if you would take your presentations, the agendas, and turn to the back page, and I have a little homework assignment for you. It's called a letter to self. And I want you, in the course of today, to go ahead and take that sheet. And they say the greatest time that a leader can reflect on themselves is when they are the autobiographical author of their own story. So I want you to take, knowledge is nothing unless you can take it and immediately apply it to work. Otherwise, I've just kind of entertained you for a while. You want to take this stuff and you want to go back to your organizations or your families or your siblings and you want to work it out. So put your name on there, dear me. State your name here. Okay, and the first question you want to answer is, what are you going to do to increase your critical skills, your ethical decision-making skills, or your sense-making skills in the next 10 days, okay? And you can think about that. We did paradigms. It could be watching a TED Talk. It could be reading a book. It could be, sitting down and making an organization recently something didn't go quite right, and you can maybe break it down and encourage. Critical thinking is a skill that is taught and developed. The second question I want you to answer is, who do you have that you implicitly trust? And who do you have in your world that is quadrant 1, 2, and 3 that you probably need to spend less time with? You need those quadrant 4. You need those foolish people that are going to come around, and you need those wise people. So who do you have? You probably got something going on that you need to address with somebody in your organization, or there's somebody in the wings that would just love to help you and come alongside you that is going to help you carry your ethical load. Who's that going to be? And lastly, how can I empower individual commitment to raising the ethical bar in my organization? Maybe it's taking the followership test, finding out where people are. Maybe it's talking with them about using the chain and how to get to a peaceful solution rather than just create more hostility and controversy. Lots of different things that we can do, okay? After you guys put all that stuff in, and you can take some time after this or later on today, I want you to commit to taking action in each of these 3 categories by Thanksgiving, or you forego your right to turkey, stuffing, gravy, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and papa. I'm serious. Listen, I'm very disciplined, but if I don't have something at the end that tells me, you know what I'm saying? I thank God for the Air Force. If it weren't for the Air Force, I'd be living in a van down by the river, okay? You know what I'm saying? I just don't. And then you need your accountability partner, okay? Because remember, whenever we make a commitment, it's like it didn't happen if it's only us. So pick an accountability partner, somebody at your table, somebody at your workplace, and say, hey, we went over this. I want to talk with you about this, and I want you to sign it and date it. And remember, Santa sees, okay? So you want to make sure what's going on. You want to make sure you do this. But this is going to be for you guys. And I want to thank you so much for the time we have together. And if anybody has any questions, my final slide. There's my website. Please reach out, send me an email, any thoughts. I'd love to connect with you and continue the ethical dialogue. Thank you so much for what you're doing. You're going to save the world, and I'm so encouraged. Appreciate it. Thank you, Heather.